Chapter 14, March 10, 1863. The next morning Charles waited until the shop was quiet and there were no customers to attend to. He tapped gently on Aylesworth's door, popped his head in, and asked for a word in private. Curious, the man waved him to a chair. "What can I do for you, Mayberry?" The young man cleared his throat nervously. I've come to a big decision, sir," he said in a low voice. The fact is, well, I've decided to join the Confederate Army." Aylesworth's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Bless my soul, are you sure about this?" Mayberry nodded. "Yes, sir. It was no hasty decision. I've been thinking about it a long time. You know that my sympathies have always been with the South. Now I really want to do my part for the cause." The merchant frowned. "War is no lark, boy. You realize you could be killed." Mayberry shook his head. "I'm prepared, Mr. Aylesworth. This is something I just have to do. I thought it out and have no choice. But I know it isn't easy to manage. I hope, sir, maybe you'd be able to help me in some way." Aylesworth lit a cigar, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. "This comes as a surprise, Mayberry. We'll miss you in the shop. But I understand the need. Yes, indeed." He went to the door and peeped out to make sure nobody was listening. Then he returned to the desk and lowered his voice. "If you're serious, I can help you. Tomorrow leave the shop at your customary time. Come back shortly before 9 o'clock. You'll find 2 horses out back, saddled and ready." "Will you be my guide, sir?" Charles asked. Aylesworth shook his head. "I believe you know my friend, Mr. Hall? Well, he has certain dealings with the Confederacy. Has some, let us say, important documents to deliver. You can ride along with him. Hall has a secret route. From Louisville you'll head south toward Garnettsville, and at one point a barge will ferry you across the river to the Southern lines." He patted Mayberry on the shoulder. "I admire your spirit, lad. Good luck with your plan, and not a word to anyone." The young man's heart was racing. For the rest of the day he had trouble concentrating on the books and ledgers of Aylesworth and Company. But quitting time came at last. Making sure he wasn't being followed, he hurried to meet his contact. When Mayberry explained what he'd done, the contact grinned with approval and told him to follow through carefully on the arrangements. "Leave with Hall, just as planned," he said. "Somewhere on the Garnettsville road you'll walk right into a Union ambush. Of course, we'll have to arrest you both to make it look good. But have no fear, Thompson. You've done splendidly. I believe we've got our man at last." The following evening was moonless and overcast. Just before 9, Mayberry slipped into the yard behind the shop. Hall and Aylesworth were already there with the horses. Even in the darkness, Charles could sense the tall man eyeing him with suspicion. "I don't like this, P.N.," he muttered angrily. "Who is this fellow, anyway?" "No need to worry, Hall," the merchant said. "It's very safe. I vouch for the boy." Finally the agent shrugged and swung up in the saddle. As he did, Mayberry noticed the butt of a heavy Colt 44 pistol poking from Hal's belt. He mounted his own horse, praying that nothing would go wrong and that the planned ambush would work. Together the riders turned south out of town and trotted along at a steady pace. Hall remained grim and silent. Now and then he cast an evil sidelong glance at his young companion. Mayberry tried to make small talk, but finally gave up, and they rode for over an hour without speaking a word. The night was still, and Charles was beginning to get worried. Where were the Union troopers? Had something gone wrong with their timing? What would he do if the scheme failed? Soon he could hear Hall muttering anxiously to himself. At any moment the man could pull his gun, shoot him, and dump his body in the river, and no one would be any the wiser. Mayberry's tension kept slowly building. Sweat trickled down his back. In the darkness, Hall seemed to grow bigger and more menacing, a grim image foretelling doom. Charles fought to stay cool and composed. Under his breath, he began to recite a beloved psalm to calm himself. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." A loud command tore through the silence. "Raise your hands, both of you!" The spy almost whooped with relief as a squad of Union cavalrymen burst through the trees and surrounded them. Both travelers raised their hands as the captain in charge rose up and yanked the gun from Hall's belt. "Tie 'em with their hands behind their backs," he barked. Mayberry and Hall were quickly trussed, and in this ungainly manner they turned off the road and headed toward a nearby Union encampment. They were now circled by the troopers, and Hall made no attempt to escape. But Charles could still hear him muttering, cursing the Union, the entire government in Washington, and mostly his own bad luck. Safe in camp, Hall was locked up and Mayberry was released with the thanks of the captain. Worn out, he found a quiet place to sleep. The next day, he reported to Hooker's aide at headquarters. The officer beamed at him. "We caught him with the goods, Thompson. Those documents he had were secret Union plans he was planning to take to the rebels. In his papers, we also found the names of two other agents in Louisville, a sutler and a traveling photographer. They've been nabbed along with Aylesworth. A clean sweep. You couldn't have done better." Back at his own regiment, Private Thompson was praised and congratulated, and on General Hooker's orders he was presented with yet another trophy, a handsome engraved sword taken from a Confederate major during the Battle of Fair Oaks near Richmond. Later, at the chaplain's quarters, Emma described the whole adventure to Mrs. Butler. She gave her the engraved sword for safekeeping, to be left with the rifle she'd brought back from Yorktown. "Land sakes, all these trophies!" Mrs. Butler exclaimed. "I'm beginning to run out of room." The two women laughed. Neither of them knew it, but this would be the last of Emma's hard-won souvenirs. More trouble was lying ahead for her, but it was of a different kind.